Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy is John Cass, johncastnews.com. Have you signed up for johncastnews.com yet? You should. You get columns from John as well as a lot of other deep thinkers. Occasionally, John even lets me besmirch his outlet with my ravings. Welcome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
always
John.
welcome. And, you and I are going to be, we should have another Dan Prost column soon because you and I are going to be together in Naples talking to the refugees of Chicago who are in Naples. I guess we're having some sort of event there.
Yeah, that's next month, and then we'll have some beach time where you can put suntan lotion on my back and so forth. It'll be a nice
Dan,
weekend for us.
You should be, I've got to get this column of yours, and your commentary should be before every conservative mind in the country. It's that important. And I think it's on the level of, I've been listening to your podcast on American greatness and seen your commentary. It is on the level, the intellectual level of my hero, Victor Davis Hanson.
VDH.
I see you in that realm, Dan.
Well, I don't know about that, but you're talking about a distillation of sentimental barbarism, right?
I want to see a book and an essay, long essay, on the nature of sentimental barbarism and the dangers of it.
Once I return to being a scratch golfer, I'll consider it. So it's a perfect segue to our next guest, who has written another great piece, The Intersection of Identity Politics, which is an expression of sentimentality, and law enforcement. And, speaking of sentimental barbarians, you have one in New York City. He's the mayor, Eric Adams. We talked about this a bit yesterday, this remarkable riff that he went on, touting the leadership of the city while casting himself as the Christ child. I mean, it's really something to listen to. Let's hear it again. Eric Adams on who he is, what he's doing, and who he's doing it with.
Stand up. They need to see you. Deputy Mayor Williams-Ison, Deputy Mayor Mira Josie, Deputy Mayor Almanzar, Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer. Have you ever seen this much chocolate leading the city of New York? And then go down the line. Look who's here. This is representative of the city. That's why people are hating on me. You trying to figure out why they're hating on me? They're hating on me because how many of you go to church? Man, this is a Matthew 21:12 moment. Jesus walked in the temple. He saw them doing wrong in the temple. He did what? He turned the table over. I went to City Hall to turn the table over. First woman police commissioner of color. First Spanish-speaking police commissioner. First Spanish-speaking correction commissioner. Go through the line of what we're doing.
That's all real impressive, Mayor. But if you're a 62-year-old woman who was dragged on the pavement by a illegal immigrant on a moped, part of a gang that the New York Police Department has explained in detail, responsible for some 60 incidents of grand larceny and other crimes. The melanin composition of the city leadership is a little less important to you than your life.
While she's lying there, gritting her teeth through a broken hip, I hope she'd have the foresight to recall how would Trump call it? 1 Corinthians. When I became a man, I put away childish things. Mayor Adams, you have people being hurt.
Well, and it's all self-inflicted, not just with the no cash bail gambit in New York, But then, and the lawlessness that has been exacerbated by the unwillingness to prosecute repeat violent offenders because of the prosecutors there, like the prosecutors here in Cook County, but also because Eric Adams, as much as they're talking tough on law enforcement with respect to people in New York City illegally, as they're in this country illegally, he won't get off the policy that brings buses and buses and buses to New York City, and that includes a criminal element, which the city administration has so stipulated it includes. It's just the most remarkable thing. It goes on and on and on as long as people tolerate it, I suppose. Heather MacDonald has a good piece on this topic, this legislation that was moved in the city council. Is just, more piling on. Have you had enough yet? With the leadership of that city, that chocolate leadership that Eric Adams is describing, says, no, you haven't had enough punishment yet. Heather MacDonald is a Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, author of When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. And also, I actually did a conversation with Heather MacDonald on my podcast, which you can get at amgreatness.com and all the other podcast platforms a couple weeks ago. It was very good, as always. The Decadence of Identity Politics is her most recent piece. Heather MacDonald, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Dan and John. It's great to be with you. And I just have to say, somebody who is invoking diversity or his identity is doing so because he has no other accomplishments. Being female is not an accomplishment. Being black is not an accomplishment. Being gay is not an accomplishment. And if that's what you're up there touting, it's because you've got nothing else. We should absolutely stop this identity cult, but instead we have now the police that have bought into it. Not only in New York City do we have a new stop form that is requiring the cops to put down the race and sex of everybody that they stop virtually. I mean, this is not just the usual, what's known in the legal field as a Terry stop, which is a more intrusive stop where somebody's not free to go. But if an officer just is trying to talk to crime victim witnesses to get as much information after a shooting, every single person that cop approaches to say, did you see the drive-by, can you give me any information, he's got to list the race and sex of that person, which is going to lead to enormous amounts of paperwork, slow policing down, all because of this phony idea that if the police stop more minority civilians, it's because they're racist. That's not the case. The reason that there are higher numbers of stops of minority civilians is because they are in neighborhoods that are very high crime thanks to minority criminals. We are engaged in this complete lack of truth, lack of honesty about the fact of inner city crime, and we're pretending that it does not exist, and instead we're blaming the cops for simply giving us a message we don't want to hear about the breakdown of the inner city.
What is the policy aim of having too many, what is this called again? The legislation is?
The How Many Stops Act?
How many stop? Yeah, what is the professed policy aim? If I'm a real cop, a real police, right? Not the house cats, but the real coppers, homicide detective, somebody on the street, I've got to list all my witnesses by race, and if I misgender? So, Jesus, if I misgender someone, madam, I thought we've established what you are, madam. Now we're just talking about the price. Am I disciplined on the form?
The policy aim is to smoke out what they believe is endemic police racism. Mm-hmm. This is not about improving policing. It's about prosecuting this idea that we're blaming the messenger. And the California form that is now out this year is even worse. That's where you do get into the misgendering issue, John, where not only are officers going to have to list the race of their people they stop, they have to list their own sexual identity. If they make a stop, they have to check boxes for the officer's gender. Are they a cisgender man? Are they a cisgender woman? Are they a transgender man? Are they a transgender woman? Or are they a non-binary person? And there's even more categories they have to fill out regarding the person they stopped. They have to say perceived sexual orientation, LGBT plus, straight, heterosexual, and then the usual cisgender versus transgender. It is absolute decadence. This is the people that are committed to identity politics who think that this is the most important axis for understanding human existence that are simply promoting this into fields for which it's completely irrelevant. You know, that has nothing to do, figuring out what the officer's sexual identity is has nothing to do with fighting crime, but it's all about simply promoting this idea that we should remain divided by these fake identity categories and that those are the most important things in our lives.
And by the way, it should be noted that there is a bunch of victims' families who are in New York City who are rallying against this How Many Stops Act.
Right, and in New York and in California, you have a group of police officer associations who have actually managed to get a temporary restraining order from a judge against this new 8-page form that requires officers to list their own sexual identities. So there's pushback, but who knows, whether the judges will capitulate to this eventually or the victims will get a voice. Right now, you have the advocates that only care about criminals. The whole Black Lives Matter movement is absolutely indifferent to black victims. They've never once protested those black children that have been killed. Jocelyn Adams in Chicago. Was there a Black Lives Matter rally on her behalf? No, of course not. They decided to throw in their lot with black criminals rather than black victims.
The official Chicago, like the Cook County State's Attorney or and Alvin Bragg in New York, they participate by promoting this because they think in those terms publicly and direct the dialogue to be all about racial politics rather than protecting, some innocent black woman from being assaulted, having her hips broken by some Venezuelan gang. I mean, this is it is like a grotesque comedy. It's like something, if it could be written, if Hieronymus Bosch were a writer rather than a painter, he would do something on this. But he leaves it to Heather MacDonald and Dan Proft to explain it. But my God, it's just amazing.
Well,
amazing.
I mean, this is not as serious as law enforcement, but it speaks to the larger cultural rot that you're describing, Heather. Legislation has been introduced in Illinois you may want to take judicial notice of. The Secretary of State shall include data fields on annual report form that a corporation will report the aggregate demographic information of its directors and officers, race, ethnicity, gender, disability, veteran, sexual orientation, gender identity. Same thing with charitable organizations that report grants of $1 million or more, and so on and so forth. So this counting by race and every other identity is quickening, if anything, in spite of the Harvard admissions case at the Supreme Court, in spite of the self-immolation of a couple of Ivy League presidents. It is still on full throttle.
Well, and it will continue to be on full throttle as long as we have these vast academic skills gaps and crime behavior gaps. We are insisting on equality of outcome in order to turn our eyes away from the fact that there is a huge failure of family culture, of education in the inner city, so that if you hire on the basis of merit and on colorblind excellence, you will not have a proportionally diverse workforce. That's not because we're a racist society today. It's not because employers are racist. It's because 66% of black 12th graders don't even possess the most partial mastery of the most basic 12th grade math skills, like being able to do arithmetic. That's why Google does not have 13% black computer scientists or engineers. But we don't want to talk about that, and we would rather blame ourselves for phantom racism than acknowledge the fact that there are still very, very large skills gaps. And when it comes to crime, the reason we have black overrepresentation in the prison system is not because the criminal justice system is racist. It is not. It's because the police are going where crime is happening, where people are being gunned down in these barbaric drive-by shootings. And that's because of family breakdown, again, where young black males are not being socialized, and they're out there gunning down their gang rivals when they feel dissed. That's the problem. But instead, America would rather declare itself white supremacist, something that Joe Biden can't tire of declaring, than looking hard on at the pathologies of inner city culture.
Heather MacDonald, Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. The book, When Race Trumps Merit, How the Pursuit of Equity Sacrifices Excellence, Destroys Beauty, and Threatens Lives. Heather, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and John.
And she joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
No spin, no agenda, just the news. That is what the Center Square gives readers every day, covering vital issues like crime, border policies, and education. The Center Square focuses on holding state and federal government accountable to you, the American taxpayer. Sign up for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com. No spin, no agenda, just news. That's thecentersquare.com.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest